Okay, I think we're ready to kick off.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Derek Gunderson, and I just want to welcome everyone on behalf of the Northwestern Center on Law, Business, and Economics to our next People Analytics virtual career meetup. At this point, I'm just going to turn it over to Director of our Workforce Science Project, Deborah Weiss. Deborah?
Thanks, Derek. We are delighted to see you all here. I'd like to welcome our moderator, Richard Rosenow, the Vice President of People Analytics Strategy at One Model. He has been providing a wonderful service to the people analytics community with his listings of people analytics jobs, which I put in the chat. And these webinars are an opportunity for him to guide us through a deeper dive into how organizations shape the roles and responsibilities of their people analytics teams. So I'm going to turn it over to Richard and let him introduce our wonderful guest.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Northwestern, for hosting these. It's been a fantastic opportunity to get to meet some people and get to meet the community, even though we're all scattered across the US and the world. So first off, a huge welcome to Amy Frost-Stevenson. Amy, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for coming back. You're our first repeat guest.
I feel very honored. Thank you.
Yes. This is officially season 2 after our summer break. So it's the right time for you to come back. And I'm excited to pick your brain too on like what's changed, what's happened between, and hear a little bit about your story there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I always love speaking to you, Richard and Deborah. We, have a great relationship, our team with Northwestern and some of the work that Deborah and the center is doing. So really thankful to have the opportunity to be back and to connect, hopefully with some new colleagues here too today. It's a small community, so, love meeting new people.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a plug for people on the chat or finding us on LinkedIn, please send notes to Amy and I, say hi, get connected. Because it's tough being remote and it's tough being kind of far away to kind of connect with people in person all the time. So this is a good way to kind of do this virtually. But let's kick things off. Amy, I know we've had you on before, but for those of you that missed you the first time, would love to hear a little about your journey. How did you find your way over to people analytics?
Yeah, I think I shared this last night. So I'm the Director of People Insights for HP now, but I've had a few of these roles now over the years, helping build out COE functions. So it's not a space I'm new to. But to the question, how did I come to People Analytics, People Insights? I would say through a more circuitous route, I think is the polite, diplomatic way I've put it before. I actually majored in pre-veterinary medicine in undergrad. I thought I was going to be a veterinarian. And then, basically senior year decided like I was pretty interested in psychology and in particular IO. I think I had like an elective and I had an IO course when I was a senior. So anyway, that started the love of the field and decided to get my master's in that. And then once I got my master's, I had an opportunity to go abroad and work internationally. And it was meant to be a 6-month kind of endeavor to get some international business work experience in management consultation on my resume. And one of these situations where 6 months turned into 6 years, and then it was 10. And then all of a sudden I was like, well, if I don't go back and get my PhD, there's a high likelihood I won't. And I knew I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
What had happened over those 10 years in terms of the kind of growth of our field, it's starting, frankly, to get like even more airplay. Not that we've ever not had a big, basis, but starting to get really visible with the business community. And frankly, some of the developments in terms of computational power, measurement techniques, and all that, to me, I was really kind of glad that I had a bit of a break between, in my case, it was beneficial. So anyway, the funny thing about People Analytics, People Insights, it's been around for a long time and maybe not called that, right? There's been a lot of debates around how long the field has actually existed, but I was doing, again, management consultation and kind of business operations metrics, but the whole idea was tying together data and telling a story with it, analyzing it and telling a story. And in my previous life, it was more around contract performance narratives. But anyway, I'll kind of end there, but say the one funny thing is I always swore up and down I would never work in HR. And, funny thing is, like, famous last words, never say that, because it's ended up being a wonderful home. And I've been really happy to kind of land and dig in and put roots in the analytics field all these years since. So, yeah.
Super helpful.
Yeah.
I'd love to, if I could pull it, just going back to the PhD for a second, because there are probably some folk listening to this or maybe listening to it later that are like at that crossroads where like, how do I develop my career, or do I want to go back at some point?
Mm-hmm.
I know I've been there too. Like I've always had a back of my head. I'm like, maybe someday go back for a PhD, kind of go down that route. Could you talk to a little bit about like what looking back on it, what you picked up there that like you're like, yes, I needed that to go forward, or some things you had in mind as you were making that decision.
Yeah.
It'd be just helpful to
I
hear
would
about.
say, yeah, sure. That's a great question. At the time I did it, I will say there's some things that have changed now that may have altered my decision making process. But
Yeah,
at the time, like I said, I had gotten my master's. I had some time to practice, if you will, be a practitioner in the field, and understand that I definitely wanted to be a practitioner, not an academic, even though I really respected that. So a little bit of it was determining, do I really want to go back into this? Because there is, getting a PhD, you still have to operate in the academic world, and you're going to have to do research, and you're going to have to,
a lot of
and
work.
then, yeah, right. But the reality is the deciding factor for me was I just wanted a really concentrated, in residence, opportunity to step away from work and, really dig into a deeper level of understanding about, again, measurement techniques and more advanced statistical, knowledge, and the opportunity to really put that into practice with data and research, and prove that through research. So that was really what decided. And what I'll say is now we have so much more available to us in terms of being able to learn, as
Yeah,
professionals, right? So, I won't list every single thing out there, but like, from data camp to whatever you have available to you,
for
either at
sure.
your organization or individually, or frankly, just through our knowledge, like network, right? In this community that's grown and blossomed. I don't think that was available at the same level, and didn't feel as accessible to me back then. But again, this has been, quite a while back. So I would say that was my driving factor, but I don't know that
Yeah,
would
it's
hold
helpful.
today. Yeah.
Super helpful. So let's
Yeah.
let's talk a little about your role at HP. It'd be great to hear because you've been there almost 3 years now.
2.5. Yep.
Two and a
Yep.
half. Yep. How your role
Mhm.
has changed, how it's evolved, and a little bit about what your team looks like would be great.
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, I love being here. I mean, it's been amazing. And one of the things that drew me to the opportunity, number one, was another build. I love builds, and I love fostering, these functions. And each time I've gotten to do it, it's looked different. Of course, not just being in a different organization or industry, but also, just different cultural mores within the organization and what you really are angling for and trying to achieve in analytics space as the field, of course, is growing along with you. But I was really sold on the receptivity to innovation, experimentation, piloting. I mean, all this stuff that frankly I feel like sometimes can be, or people analytics colleagues can feel blocked on when they have these great ideas or want to try something or go out of the box and really kind of push the needle. And from the get-go, it was like, no, not only will we encourage that, we really are going to like expect that out of you in whatever team it is you build. So along with that, kind of underpinning was also a lot of support around, look, you have the, kind of authority and remit to put into place the operating model and resource model that you think you need to. And I had a lot of conversations where I made sure both I was comfortable and felt like I really was going to get that support, at the end of the day, and it was going to come to fruition, and that, that they had good confidence in what I was pitching. And of course, there's a lot of colleagues on the phone today. You learn through experience and lessons learned, but also draw on some of the wonderful thought leadership and ideas of others. So it's not like I've put into place anything that a lot of you haven't talked about, frankly, written white papers on or what have you. But the fact that there wasn't a lot of argument about it making sense and being a good contemporary model to put into place, I appreciated. So that being said, what I have put into place is as a team that has, frankly, I'm really fortunate, amazing talent, kind of aligned to 4 pillars. So we have a platform enablement and data management pillar. I would call that kind of colloquially our tech team. That's probably short shrift. But they handle our complete tech stack, our data model, harmonization, some custom reporting out of our HRIS. I don't own systems, but obviously work very closely with them, and a host of other things that we'll talk about as we talk about how we're augmenting that team today. I also have reporting and analytics solutions. That team, amazing. It's my cadre of people insights partners. We also handle board of director reporting to our executive leadership team, helping our executives set and Total Rewards help set the compensation and goals, based on data and kind of glide pathing and things like that. We also support external surveying, like Great Place to Work, Diversity Inc. I could go on and on. That team does so much, right? as well as, I should mention, work with our fantastic Northwestern and TALREOS colleagues on supporting some of the endeavors that Deborah's driving in that space. So I also own Global Employee Listening. So that includes our annual engagement survey to, over 65,000 colleagues worldwide, our Pulse and continuous listening program, a lot of consultancy and advisory services to other groups that are doing surveys that hit the employee base, but they kind of go through us. We do have some helpful governance, mechanisms in place for that. And then finally, strategy and operations management, which includes a few pieces. I have an amazing strategic initiatives leader and operations manager who keeps me, oh my gosh, talk about an important role. Helping manage our internal KPIs and SLAs, but also, handling, our user base for our products and solutions, the communications, the user support, our branding and kind of presence internally and increasingly externally, vendor and budget management. So huge role. And then finally, HR data privacy. So this is something else that's maybe unique for some teams. So while it sits in People Insights, and that was a very conscious and deliberate decision, my HR privacy leader is partners directly with corporate privacy, kind of like a dotted line, but also she serves the entire HR community globally. So it's just, I feel really, really blessed to have been able to put in place this structure. It's worked amazing for us so far.
That's a fantastic set of pillars. I want to spend an extra beat on the ops management, if you don't mind, because that's a tough one to get resourced.
Oh my!
Because I've seen like a lot of teams tend to hire doers because they're like, hey, we want to do more, so let's bring on data scientists, let's bring on more ops people, like more reporting people. But it's rare to actually get that, okay, this horizontal person that's going to scale us. Could you talk through how you made the pitch for that?
Oh my, look, it's again, and we'll talk, I think I'll touch on some of this too about like value prop and how you get investment. I mean, you bring strong business principles to the table, right? Look, any other area of business, you have operations management, right? So and don't want to get too far into the whole demand intake and management model, but that's a big piece of it. Is like we have to be able to show like what work we're engaged in, where efficiencies can be gained, and how we are going to do that either through automation, our tools and technology, what we're developing, and so forth. So really, it's a pretty sensible pitch. Like we have to be able to show and tell you what work we're doing and what value it's bringing, and how we can optimize from an efficiency standpoint, what we're doing, and also increase the ROI through our proposals. So that really is a big part of it.
I love that. If I could wave a wand and every people analytics team could get an ops person, I would do it tomorrow. It's one of those things where like if it's nobody's work, then it's everybody's work.
Yeah,
and until you make it somebody's work, you can't really get ahead.
Yeah, and so it's just been a real blessing to have a couple of my colleagues. The strategic initiatives person also does a large part of partnership with that person. Because the strategic initiatives person is helping manage our roadmap, right?
Yeah,
so there's the operational, and then we determine what we need to prioritize and why, and we have to have a cogent argument around that. So it's a really good sort of symbiotic relationship there.
Yeah, it's a cool team setup.
Yeah, thank
you.
So
as we're thinking about the past, because I think you came on in February or March, just about 7 or 9 months ago now. We're nearing the end of the year, I guess. Yeah. But is there anything you were doing like at that time until now? Was there anything like really surprising that came up this year, or things that have happened in the past 6 to 8 months? Would just love to get your quick take on like what did you not expect, but something happened this year, if there is something like that.
We since I have listening, we determined, and I knew this would be the case as part of our revamped listening strategy, that we would be taking the opportunity to streamline our tech, right? So we had multiple kind of partners and players in that space. So we wanted to go with a underpinning, again, refresh strategy. One tool, one platform, if you will. We could speak to this too in terms of the partnerships we've built that have been really, really important in terms of cyber, IT, privacy, legal, some of these things. It's still a new space while we come in to kind of bring these things to the forefront from HR. Like it's a new thing for them to think of it under the auspices of analytics and insights. And so it takes some time. The short answer is like sometimes those procurement and contracting processes can be fairly lengthy. and even a bit more difficult, especially in light of wanting to make sure that what we put into play is sort of in concert with our broader digital and transformation and centralized BI approaches, right, from the enterprise. And so I would say, even though I'm a bit of a realist and a pragmatist, I hope we would move a little bit faster. So where this ended up is like we were really pushing to implement to get our survey out on time so that we have to go out to our employees. We're very, very accustomed to having it at the same time each year and push that back. That would have not been a good thing for us to have. So that was something we've had to kind of manage this year. And then I'm trying to think, you mentioned skills when we were kind of chatting last night. The speed with which the people organization decided to kind of pursue some skills intelligence technology, and me having to figure out the partnership model and sort of factoring that into our roadmap, right? Even though I don't necessarily own that whole implementation, we are a strategic partner and an SME on that from a data and analytics perspective. So it's like, I don't think it was like complete shock, but it came really fast and furious. So that was another big thing.
Sounds, that's one that still feels like it's finally picking up speed. Like everyone talked about it in the first half of the year, but then everyone's like, okay, now we actually have to do something about it. And that doing something about it seems like it's happening this second half of the year. It's interesting, both those you're talking about though, because it's something that like mature people analytics leaders like you are, and like folk in the space that have built these big teams, I think we realized later that like procurement strategy is a real part of people analytics. And that's not something we learn in IO or data science or data analyst or any like on the job people analytics. You don't learn that naturally. But it's one that as a people analytics leader, I think it's one that comes up a lot. So it sounds like you're learning to kind of own that a little bit more and kind of bring that in a little bit more. And
I mean, I did have a history, because I sort of alluded to the fact that I came up through, contracting and project, kind of operations management and all that sort of stuff. So like I had a background, it was from federal contracting. So talk about a whole other world of like, approach to things. But I've always had kind of a finger in the space throughout my professional career. Now, to your point though, I do think it's kind of changed for HR functions and certainly analytics groups. I will again tout kind of my strategy and ops pillar in that, it's a full-time job shepherding contracts and big tech, pieces down the field. And so the amount of partnership and networking that you have to do to not only make that happen, but as fast and as seamlessly as possible, really can't be understated. Now, to that point, I would also say it's really, this is my perspective. I think, analytics leaders, and they're doing an amazing job of this, but like, we're not just networking within the HR organization or with top level leadership to get credibility for a front. You need to be making friends in every pocket, because like I mentioned, privacy, legal, cyber, there's all these places where a knee-jerk reaction could be, well, we know about GDPR. That sounds too dangerous. We're just like, you get shut down, right? And then you either face a brick wall or it takes you even more time to surmount it. So the closer you can be to those groups and understand what their constituent sort of concerns are, and you can prepare for that, the better. And of course, having good partners, whether you're, building or buying, can go a long way there too. If they're well-versed, right? It's less painful of a process.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. As much as people analytics leaders need to learn procurement, I think procurement and legal leaders have never heard of people analytics. So just getting them up to speed on those like basics of like, why are we doing this? It's critical to making any kind of headway.
I would agree with that for sure. It's a great question.
So let's chat about the year a little bit, because it's been a funny year where there was especially early in the year, there were a number of teams that it felt like kind of finance took the wheel and did a 7% layoff. And like across the board, we saw a lot of these teams have that sort of layoff experience, or people analytics team kind of tighten the belts. I've been tracking HP though, and you guys have been growing consistently through that, finding people, hiring people. Just one, I appreciate that you've been able to kind of keep that pacing and continue your build through that. And that just speaks to the credit of the work you've done and the relationships you have internally. But do you have any advice for folk that are kind of looking back and saying like, okay, how did some groups kind of survive this, and how did some groups maybe like struggle with this kind of economic climate that we're in?
Yeah, it's a really complex question with a lot of different approaches to answering it. I mean, some could be from an industry perspective, because I know a lot of my tech colleagues, kind of got hit hard, right? I do think, there was a really critical look is, really return to office and hybrid work started getting a little bit more like real, like what does this mean? And, for various leaders and organizations, how do they want to activate that? I would say for us, I've been happy that we've taken a bit of a, very measured approach, and my leadership, right? In terms of figuring out what does this mean for us. And interestingly, people insights has been on a lot of these cross-functional and cross-business projects, right? Not just in terms of campaigning around what are we doing, but all the listening efforts that we're doing, both internally with our employees and our customers. So we're actually getting involved from a product standpoint as well about how does this land? So tech's an interesting space there, and I wouldn't speak to every tech organization as being a corollary for us, but I think it was a lot of folks that felt this, and my heart goes out to the people who are navigating this. And in terms of our growth, I would say I had pitched this from the get-go, right? So there was sort of a run rate and phased approach to getting to full operation around the model. And so some of that's just sort of an artifact of I had already kind of done a lot of planning, but knew it wasn't going to be like a 6-month thing. So what you see is me growing, but that's been 2.5 years of laying groundwork and getting the buy-in, right?
Yeah.
So for what that's worth, no, and I never want to be glib and say, the second you get complacent, we could all be hit with things that we don't expect in terms of contracting our teams. And of course, I'm happy to say I don't feel like that's any kind of issue for us, but it's tough. I don't know that I have a great answer, Richard. And I've seen some great commentary and thought around it. I've seen some posts, recently kind of given their thought specific to the analytics build. And, I think, we're seeing something stabilize, right? So how much of it is, demand and supply right now? And I think that's really going to continue to become more clear as we head into the end of the year, right?
No, that sounds right. And it was definitely a question that I don't know the answer to most of these questions, but that one in particular, it's one I wanted to pick your brain because I think from the outside looking in, I think you have fantastic tenure with the group. You have the relationships with the executives. You've gone after a kind of realistic and tech-enabled bill instead of just like let's add lots of heads as soon as we can. Mm-hmm. And I think that's served you well. Whether any of us could have seen any of this coming is a totally separate question, but I've appreciated that you've continued to hire and continue to grow the team throughout these different downturns.
Yeah, and I think we are getting to a place where I'm feeling really good about the foundation we have in place. There's a few areas where we will likely have to augment over the next couple or few quarters, but we'll do that in conjunction with kind of managing our budget closely and really taking a critical look at if the roles are still needed and the scope of those roles and what they're going to bring to the team. So it's a continual sort of partnership too with our budget leaders within HR to and business and find all that sort of interplay to we'll look at it and see if we need to change course. But I'm feeling like we're in a really good place, and of course we've got a few open roles that we're really, really excited about to place soon. So yeah,
and that's a really good segue. So let's chat about those open roles. It'd be great to hear because I am personally fascinated too because you have some unique roles in there that you don't see other places. And I'm really excited to pick your brain about them. But could you walk us through the high level of the three?
Sure.
And maybe as you're introducing them, just kind of a little bit of like, hey, why this one? Why now? Would be really helpful too.
Yeah, so I'll start with listening because my other two are in the same pillar and there's some interplay there. So the listening team I mentioned, we had pretty lean, like a lot of organizations, it was a lean and scrappy, team, amazing talent, but we really knew we needed some extra lift, right? And especially going through the implementation. I mean, we made it happen. But we knew, it's one thing to get through flying the plane and even tech implementation. It's another one we're looking toward the future of what we're trying to put into place from a listening strategy perspective. And in particular, the past year that we, have been brought into some of these other, like I said, projects, whether it's consults on, whether it's, our real estate group or another group, corporate affairs doing a survey, there's just a lot of asks for the listening team. And because the leader of the listening team and I are both IOs, I was also brought in just to sort of help give an extra set of like hands to a lot of these efforts. And we knew that wasn't sustainable as I pivot to doing some of our stuff we need to achieve this next year, right? So there was it really wasn't an argument. I will say another thing is here at HP, the listening program is so central to our culture. Our executives really appreciate, our employees look forward to participating. Our participation rates are off the charts consistently year over year. So there's just a lot of importance placed on. So anyway, all that to say, we have a program manager in the listening team role available, and I think Richard, we have links to all this that we'll share with everyone or within the posting. But
I put them in the chat already.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not monitoring the chat, so I'll have to check that. But yeah, so we are very motivated to get the right person in, and we've had a lot of interest in the role. Listening, of course, tends to be a really fantastic space with a lot of talent. I know that some listening teams, they sit in talent analytics, some sit elsewhere. People insights here at HP, we actually report up through a group called People Services and Insights, more akin to like a global ops group. But the way it's structured here, it's amazing because my colleagues are the head of systems, workforce planning, and others. So it makes a lot of sense, and we have a really good situation in terms of being able to work across teams within our organization. So yeah, it's a mid to senior level role, and we're trying to frankly focus on building really experienced listening talent bench. So this is kind of the first role. We've just recently placed another role, so this will be the second one underneath my listening leader. So really excited about it. I encourage everyone who's interested in the space to take a look at the role and see if there's if it's of interest to you. But we're going to be doing big stuff this next year. Even though we implemented the new platform, we have a lot of kind of consultation work to do on some of the reporting and analytics, not just in terms of the more advanced stuff, but what's natively available in the fabric of our tech to make it better for the end users that are going to leverage that mechanism to get data and insights and whatnot out. So there's just a lot of exciting work to be done this next year.
Oh, it sounds like it. I heard a couple of things I really like. Like one is, having that new platform in place is really nice because it's in place already now. So whoever comes in actually has like, hey, here's the standard, we're going across.
Yeah.
But also like anytime the head of people analytics gets pulled into kind of the IC work, and that happens to everybody because you have gaps, different things, expansion, that's important work. Like it just speaks to it kind of like from the outside, take a look at it and be like, okay, Amy had to tackle some of this work. This is the kind of stuff you're going to get to work on. It's not generic survey. It's not some random person's. It's like, this is company level stuff.
Yeah. And in fact, sorry to interrupt. I was just gonna say, in fact, that's also, sort of underscored by the fact that, my listening leader and I, we're brought in to present the result. We do the presentation to the ELT, and just a matter of fact, yesterday we did kind of the people org one too, but we assist all of our L1 leaders and so we're very visible, and that's actively supported. So again, to your point, it speaks to the importance of this group, and frankly, you're not buried like 10 levels deep. It's very visible and important work to us. Very
cool. So if folk are interested in applying, we have that link in the chat, but also please send that to folk in the space. We're always looking for lots of referrals. Let's send a lot of people Amy's way for each one of these. So even if that one's not for you, please think of some folk or one or two folk you could send Amy. And then Amy, the next two, these are fascinating, especially, I really want to pick your brain about the UX UI one, but could you introduce these next two?
Sure. So I'll start with the data engineer role, and then we'll spend some time on the UI UX. So I mentioned the platform enablement and data management team. Both of these roles would sit within that pillar. The reality is, even though, of course, I have also a manager and leader over that pillar, there's so much work to be done this next year as we activate our analytics tech. And like I said, we've got a lot of work to get that through, approvals and whatnot. But the reality is, the first year we're going to be spending a lot of time on, building the dimensional data model for HR. It's not just for people insights and select stuff. We're making, a lot of thoughts around what's the triage strategy for us about what we bring in and when. It's one thing to you've got to get core HRS data in, right? But then there's a lot of choice points, right, around what's most important for us to intersect and when. Is it learning? Is it listening? Is it performance? Is it all these other things? And I do know, because I know this, I talk to a lot of my colleagues, the tech landscape in HR is very busy. Here. And so, as we're also, I mentioned, onboarding some new tech in spaces like talent intelligence and frankly, decommissioning others, we have to make decisions about, what we archive, how we might use it, like how we can support. So, ultimately, this role will be very focused on, again, that dimensional data model and data harmonization, helping drive conversations around agreement on calcs and metrics, because the reality is we still have gaps there where some, folks think of, I don't know, career progression in some way, and others use totally different things. So the fact that we're going to be kind of the nexus for managing that, back end, all that fun back end stuff, this role will be very, very focused on that, and also working closely with our digital and transformation organization, again, to make sure that we are rowing in the same direction, even though we're quote unquote walled off because we're HR. We're doing it in partnership with them, just to make sure we're ticked and tied there.
That's great to hear.
One other thing I'll add about it before moving on to the UI UX role is that another thing that I've been consciously chasing and here with the team structure is we are a technical team, right? And so working to take a critical look at the structure and nature of our jobs, the architecture, to make sure that we've got, in the instances where we do, like this is, extremely technical role, that we're sourcing it and, putting it against a job family and job function that is technical in nature, and I think that's one thing that's made it difficult potentially to attract this type of tech talent into HR previously, as if they're getting, pegged against a, I don't know, whatever, a HR ops role or a, VP role or something that doesn't fit, right? From multiple perspectives, not just the scope of the role, but also the compensation levers that we have to leverage. I mean, it's important to me to make sure that we're attractive because it's an amazing organization, but also that we have a good competitive, philosophy in place for not just compensation, but also for career progression. Of course, being that I'm in a tech organization, if we're bringing in software engineers and data engineers, there's so many career pathing opportunities. And that's another thing that,
cool.
I've worked to sort of build, is like paths into and outside of HR that wouldn't have maybe necessarily been as common in the past. Right.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I think there is a fear from some data engineers that they come into people analytics, and compared to other roles that are out there, like it's rare to find a data engineer that wants to be ahead of people analytics someday.
Yeah.
It's like that's the one I haven't found, but we need them in people analytics. We need data engineers to come in, or we need to work with software that kind of tackles that space. So it is always tough to retain them. So I think coming at it from that mindset, just it speaks to the leader that you are, that you're thinking of that to start. Before they come in, you're ready to kind of figure out where to place them, and as they head out, that's a thoughtful approach that a lot of roles don't have. So I just thank you for saying that, and thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, thank you. So the other one, UI UX, we are really excited about this role too. So, this is one that we were, thoughtful waiting to bring on board, but we feel is increasingly important. So even though we're going to be onboarding tech and deciding, we're still solutioning, right? We're still building products and solutioning stuff, Richard, that we're pushing out. Now we're doing it with the thought that we know what's coming down the pipe, But the reality is like, I work really closely with our customer experience group, and we, our certainly our HR community, my business leaders, they are my internal clients. And so we're bringing to bear a lot of, kind of product-based approaches to development, as well as CX, centered approaches to user, I would say, designing from a human-centered approach, but also a user approach, right? We need to be designing things that meet the need, they're fit for purpose. And that's a specialized skill set, right? So we're really excited to have this person that can come in and really advise us. And the other interesting thing I will note about this role is, well, in the tech team, there's also a very close collaboration with the reporting and analytics solutions group that I told you about. Again, I was saying how much they do, but another thing that we've been conscious to do is with our insights partners, we are finding people who are gifted with consulting. That's an amazing skill set, but we're also finding, I would say, some unicorns that are so technically capable, such that we empower them, in their role of documenting our client requirements internally. They're empowered to prototype. So going back to that comfort with prototyping and piloting and testing, my insights partners are actually building, prototypes, and then they go through some iterations. And once we determine through my other group that they meet the remit for, our roadmap and what we have, on the docket, they get moved over to the tech team for scaling, you know? So that's something else that I think is unique. But the reason I bring this up in relationship to the UI UX person is I feel like they're going to really be a force multiplier to help support that consulting insights partner team as they are painting the art of the possible for our clients, such that it is realistic, but also aligned with what we have planned. We don't need to drag all of our clients into the dirty details about what we're doing from a technical standpoint. You know, not that I don't think they would want to know, but you know, they're not speaking a technical language, so we have to make sure that those two pillars are talking, you know,
Yeah.
both. So like that's another, I think, thing that this role is going to bring to the team. It's going to be amazing.
That's fantastic. And I think I really like the way you're talking about it too, that it's going to help enable and facilitate that transfer from iterate one-off to scaled product. And that movement between the team itself, like being able to support that with a role specifically, speaks to the niche of this role. Like you can't take this job description and just apply it somewhere else. Like you actually have to have your setup, and being able to build and support that model. I think that's when you get to that next level of maturity, which is just really exciting to see.
It takes time. And, you know, we still have some, I mean, like anybody, you know, you hear these stories and you're like, oh, someone's so far ahead of me. It's like, you know, the reality is not. I mean, everybody's journey and path looks a little different, but I do appreciate what you're saying, because, you know, I'm so appreciative that there's support around the model that we put in place, because we're really going to, I think, hit the gas this next year. And you know, we've been heads down the past couple of years getting all this in place, but I'm really ready to like open up the throttle this next year, if you will. So
Cool.
Yeah.
So for that UX UI one, what kind of backgrounds are you expecting will apply? Not to constrain you to certain backgrounds for anyone listening that might be interested, but just it'd be good to kind of hear a little bit of the thought process of who do you think is going to land in a role like that?
I mean, you know, I'm just starting to talk to some. I will say this is the first time that I've recruited for this type of role.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit closer to the data engineering stuff, not just because, you know, I've a little bit deeper than that, but like my husband's also like kind of he works for Microsoft. He's in tech. I hear about this all the time, you know, at home. But the UI UX piece, you know, while I've been aware of the, you know, the importance in the skill set, you know, I'm learning a lot about what those professionals bring to the table. And there's two pieces to it, right? That's another thing that I've learned is in talking to some people, they've been focused on one versus the other. So the interface versus the design. And I think we are looking for someone who has, you know, like both of those pieces, experience. Because there's, you know, the ability to really understand what are the, you know, capabilities and constraints of whatever, you know, system technology that you have in place. So when you talk about the interface, you have to understand the mechanics of how it works and what's possible, how it can be manipulated and maybe used better. And then of course there again is the experience, and that's the understanding. You have to get in the shoes of the user and really understand day to day, how are they going to interact with it? How are they going to use it? But how's it going to like help them do their job better or help them make a decision? And so to me, I would say instead of talking about particular backgrounds or skill sets, I'm looking for like someone to speak to both of those things and understand both of those aspects and how they would bring that to the table here in the context of what we're trying to achieve, you know? So
it's very cool. And I think the other thing I love about it is a lot of times you think about people analytics teams as just that's where the quants hang out. But the reality is like the quants, like the quantitative folk, like, you know, those like the data nerds. But it's like this is a qualitative role. And it's qualitative in the sense of like a rigorous scientific qualitative approach. Which to bring that kind of like user story and that ethnography about the user maybe and that kind of angle, it's a different one, which is exciting.
And that's another area where we're again working in really close partnership with like our CX group and some others in the business where we, you know, do of course like we work with we sit fly on the wall and look at how they're doing like journey mapping and persona development and all that sort of stuff. And we've been able to leverage and pull from some of that wonderful expertise and work internally. Why reinvent the wheel when we have world-class, you know, folks doing that? We're HP. We've done some really amazing stuff there. So, it's a really fun time. And so when we talk about how the field has evolved, I never would have imagined even, you know, 10 years ago or whatever that it would, you know, look like what it looks like now, and that we'd be doing. Don't even get into, you know, AI and all this other, you know, fun stuff that we have, you know, afoot, and what that's going to look like. Even forget 10 years, but like two from now, I have, you know, it's a really exciting time to be part of the.
It is. So everybody on the call, I've got maybe one more question here, then we'll turn off the recording and we'll go to Q&A. Okay. I see a couple questions that have come through already. Thank you. I'm making sure to document those. I'll go through those first. But as I'm asking this next question, as we're talking, take a minute, think about the conversation. If you have any questions for Amy, I know Amy's a phenomenal open book here on everything kind of people analytics. So we'll open it up in just a couple minutes here. But just want to give you a heads up so I don't flip the switch and then we wait and see who answers. So here, I've got maybe one more question. I mean, I've got a bunch more questions for you, but just for sake of time, let's talk about building an investment case for people analytics. I would love to hear any advice you have for teams that are thinking about building or teams that might be feeling understaffed or a little stretched thin today, if they need to get that extra resource to build that investment case. Do you have any tips or tricks? I know it's a pretty general way to approach it, but it'd be great to hear from you about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say first things first is realize we may still be in a tough environment for a little bit. So, don't get discouraged. I mean, I know that's an easy thing to say because it's, when you've got some, wind behind your sail versus not. But I think you hear a lot of people talking about quick wins and big bets, right? We've used that terminology and I don't know, it's all over. But I mean, I think there's some truth there. I think, you have to paint that picture though in a way from a business argument that is justified and that makes sense. So it's almost like, you've got to get someone willing to gamble on you for the quick win. Think about the big bet. You always think about gambling. It's like, no, I think the gamble is actually getting someone just to like be willing to give you an opportunity to show what you can do. And then again, paint that view of like, okay, I was able to do this, really scrap, but like, look what this could look like if we get a little bit more support, whether that's through resources or technology in some cases. Because I know some lean, small teams that are doing amazing stuff because they've got the really right tech stack behind them, right? So there's a balance to be struck there, but just be really clear on, what they're going to get out of it, at the end of the day, and who your audiences are, because you can't. I think the other thing is when you're talking about marketing and bringing a message and making it land, you probably need to frame it a little differently depending on the audience. So if you're going up through your leadership or the chief, people officer or CHRO versus, having an opportunity to kind of slide that in. If you do have some visibility with like an ELT member, put those little like nuggets in. Yeah. You'd be amazed at how many things come back, bubble back up to the surface around leadership roundtables when you've, again, networked and you've like, made nice and done some favors, So, I mean, some of it's just old fashioned, that's it. But I want to be so, again, naive to say that's a great detailed answer or works for anybody. But I do think it's going to continue to be a little bit tough for a while.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
And for maybe I'll squeeze one more question here for folk who are just starting their career in people analytics, because we've got a mix of folk on the line. Some of them are more seniors, some are more juniors, some people are just on the market right now. What advice would you give to someone who's starting their career in the people analytics space?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, come to events like this and network as much as you can. I will say one thing about this community, sort of mentioned it early on. This is, I mean, in my view, the most supportive professional community that certainly I've experienced. And leaders are willing to talk to you. All you have to do is reach out. Now you have to be, patient. We're busy people, and of course there's a lot going on, but I mean, I can think of an instance where I won't name a name, but someone reached out to me. It was a graduate student and, they had noticed that there was an opening for a summer, internship role. And, it's sort of a misnomer because it said employee experience. Well, that actually like sits in a different group. But I could see how someone could get confused, but this, industrious person is like, well, let me figure out who might can talk to me about this. And, reached out to me and, he ended up getting the role. And, now I'm going back to speak to their, PhD and MA programs this year. So it really is about building connections and just asking for help, or asking questions. And you'd be amazed at how far you get there. Beyond that, I would say, if you really think you're interested, take advantage of, like we were mentioning, some of these data courses and tech courses and understand, the different types of models and groups out there and where you might be interested. What I've shared with you, there's a lot of different spaces to get involved if you're, coming to a team like mine, right? So just kind of figure out what your interest area is. And I would say, I would also look for, a team that at least has the option of doing some rotational work, right? So just like I mentioned, I've got these, insights partners that are amazing, technically capable. The leaders have talked about, like, would there be an instance where we're going to stretch projects and put them harder on the tech team side or vice versa? It's really helpful for really strict tech people to understand, like, how clients are kind of conceptualizing and working through things. It helps, again, that, product functional and technical requirements conversation go more smoothly for a team. So anyway, those are just some examples, but I would say network and reach out, ask for help, ask questions.
It's fantastic. And so, Amy, you mentioned the community. I'll say a huge thank you to you for joining us from the community today.
Thank you.
Just the advice you have, the thoughtfulness you have, the excitement you have. I know everybody had a fantastic takeaway so far. So we're going to close out this section. And so just for the sake of the recording, Amy, thank you for being on. And for anyone else, we'll see you next time. But for those of you who are on the chat, stay on the chat. We're going to stay open for 15 more minutes to do some Q&A. But farewell to our viewers of this video.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Let's